Thank you very much indeed, Madam President, and thank you, members of this Council. We meet at an important time. It has been 2 years too long, since the Yemeni people had the chance for a negotiated end to this war. Today, therefore, as we meet, we have the chance to weigh the opportunities for peace, and I hope to begin the difficult and uncertain journey away from war. Earlier this week, Madam President, I had the privilege to meet with a man who has lived the mission of peace and of reconciliation. I'm referring to His Highness the Emir of Kuwait. I cannot easily remember someone who has so successfully confronted the challenge of war and then of peace, which succeeded it, and who has so clearly shown us how to move from one to the other. And he speaks so movingly of the process in which his country was rescued, including by the coalition, and then formed a constructive relationship with Iraq. Madam President, recently, and despite all our efforts, the pace of war has increased. We meet at a time when the focus of the war is the battle for Hudaydah, and what military people tell me about Hudaydah is that it has become the center of gravity of the war, and the Red Sea now is also a theater of war. We have tried to find a way to avoid a battle for the city and the port of Hudaydah, and we are still trying. But even though the requirements for such a deal, for such an arrangement, are not yet met, it is to be noted that our efforts, with your unified Council's support, have managed to narrow the gap between the two sides in a way that nobody expected. What is clear to me now, Madam President, is that this issue, the resolution to the specific crisis in Hudaydah, has a better chance of being resolved within the context of a comprehensive political settlement. And what does this mean for us today? I think it means that it's time long past for us together to call for an early resumption of the political process. 2 years since the last round in Kuwait. So my principal message and request to this Council today is that we urge the parties to resolve this conflict through negotiation rather than through military means, a sentiment that members of this Council have consistently expressed in recent months. After having consulted with the parties, I plan, therefore, to invite them to Geneva on September the 6th for a first round of consultations. These consultations will provide the opportunity for the parties, among other things, to discuss the framework for negotiations, to agree on relevant confidence-building measures and specific plans for moving the process forward. And I ask for the Council's support in this. In this connection, our engagements with women's groups as well as southern stakeholders are crucial for the success of future consultations. And as is set out in Security Council Resolution 2216, I would aim for as inclusive a process as possible. I didn't come lightly to this decision, and I base this on the advice given to me in the months since assuming my responsibilities by Yemenis from all quarters. I've engaged with the parties, of course, primarily, but also with civil society. And I'm especially grateful for my meetings with Yemeni women as I continue to consult with them on elements of the peace process. And their voices, unsurprisingly and consistently, remind us that Yemeni families bear the brunt of this conflict and want it done with. I know from this engagement that a political solution to this war, in line with the relevant resolutions of this Council, with the GCC initiative and the national dialogue outcome, that is available, as I have said before to this Council. Believe me, Madam President, we know what can work. We have heard it from all sides. We have talked to all of them, and we have studied the experience of past efforts to resolve this conflict. And 100 days in Kuwait as the Emir was reminding me the other day, is an enormously valuable guide for us. Madam President, an end to this war cannot come too soon for the people of Yemen. As our humanitarian colleagues are quick to remind us, and I'm sure John will do so, if we don't succeed together to put an end to it, there will be millions more Yemenis depending on the assistance of our humanitarian agencies. And I'm very conscious, as we all are, that each day costs lives which might have been saved, that people could have been alive who are not today had we acted earlier. Let me speak for a moment about what is happening in Yemen. On Hudaydah, as already mentioned, we have made progress, particularly as regards to a United Nations role in the port, which was agreed with me by the leadership of Ansar Allah some weeks ago. But it does not mean that the gap is closed. The gap is not closed. We will continue our efforts to find a peaceful solution there. This progress is due to the serious cooperation I have received from all sides, and this Council's active support in addition. And I continue to enjoy the close cooperation and support of the government of Yemen and their leadership, always an important, engaging primary partner, as well as the leadership of the coalition. I've also had a series of constructive and positive meetings with the senior leadership of Ansar Allah, and these relationships are absolutely key to any potential success we may expect in the endeavour of a political settlement. The nurturing of relationships is the primary task of somebody in my position. Let us not throw away what we have achieved on Hudaydah, therefore. I'm determined to build on it in our consultations, but let us not allow, as I've been reminded today, let us not allow progress or the absence of it on Hudaydah deter us from our primary focus, which is on the search for a political solution to this conflict. I'm concerned that Hudaydah could be a flashpoint. I take seriously any offer of de-escalation, regardless of its magnitude, including the unilateral offer from Ansar Allah to stop all attacks on shipping. Many of us would not have wanted those attacks to have happened at all. My concern is to avoid any action with dire humanitarian consequences, and nor those, more particularly in my office, which may undermine the resumption of the political process in September. And so I call on the parties, and perhaps with the support of this Council, to create a conducive environment. Then I use these words carefully, a conducive environment to allow this to happen. On other matters, I'm greatly encouraged by the common desire of the parties to have the many, many thousands of prisoners of war released. My office has been hard at work on this, and this was an issue that President Hadi, on each occasion I have met him, has particularly urged us to take a lead on. And I think this is a tribute to his humanity. And I know we all want to see this moving forward as fast as we can. Let me conclude, Madam President, by summing up my requests to you and your members. Firstly, support for my effort to begin consultations in September in Geneva. Secondly, support for de-escalation in Hudaydah and to keep the Red Sea out of the conflict. Thirdly, support for those measures I have mentioned. One, the release of prisoners. There are many others that bring hope back to the people of Yemen. It is the people of Yemen who will ensure that we have a good chance to make those political negotiations work. Without their involvement, interest, advocacy, and support, we will not make it. They need encouragement to believe that this can happen. Fourthly, please join me, as I know you will, in recognizing the extraordinary courage of international humanitarian organizations. I've had the privilege in my frequent visits to Yemen of witnessing firsthand their courage, their diligence, their reliability, their independence and impartiality. It's an exceptional privilege to all of us to be colleagues. And finally, through you, Madam, I'd like to thank this Council for the extraordinary level of support that you have provided to my efforts. It makes an enormous difference to have a united and eloquent Council asserting the principles of the United Nations. Your continued unity is, by any standards, the key to the resolution of this conflict. Thank you very much.